Hello, everybody. It's Heather and Deb, the skeptic and the mystic. Tonight, we are talking about the law of assumption. And this is something that we both have dived into and understanding. And it is something that a law that if you want your life to change, like this is everything. I mean, not everything. There's always more than one thing, right? But this is such a big part in creating change in your world. So we want to be able to explain to you what it is, some practical tools to put it into practice, and then how we've experienced in it in our own lives. And then we'd love to hear from you if you have ever experienced this. Even unknowingly, you're like, oh, I totally have done that, right? Just now hearing words. So we'd love to hear from you any examples that you have in your life, whether you're watching this replay or listening to it later. We'd love to hear like your experience with this. So
Yeah,
you want to dive in and explain what the law of assumption is, Deb?
absolutely. Well, I will piggyback on what you just said in when you're inviting people to share. Um, Spoiler alert, you are already using it. I mean,
Mhm.
the foundation is your self-concept, and it works on what you believe to be true is true for you. What you believe to be true about your experience is what you are going to experience. So sometimes that's a harsh truth because if you don't like what you're experiencing, you have to examine your beliefs, right? Because you really are responsible for creating everything that happens in your experience of life. I think it's quite related to the law of attraction. And actually, when I first stumbled upon the law of assumption, I thought, oh, this is actually how I've often interpreted the law of attraction, but there's some nuances in the difference between the two. But at its core, it's basically working on your self-concept and your belief system and how you can shape your experiences by altering what you believe to be true. So altering your assumptions about what you would like to experience in the world. Sounds so
Yeah.
simple.
Well, yeah, but no, because like I'm sure some people are listening and they're like, okay, but self-concept, like what does that even mean? Right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
right. And self-concept is essentially like who you believe yourself to be. Right.
Right.
And so if you believe that you are a loser and that you're not worthy of anything good in your life, right? You're assuming that. So then you experience life in that way.
Right.
Right? But if you believe that you are a beautiful child of the creator and that life is here to bless you, right? You're going to experience that in your life, even when things on the exterior may not seem good. And
Right.
like, I think the image that just popped into my head was, do you remember that movie, Life is Beautiful? Like, did you ever see
I don't
that?
know
Oh, my
it.
God, years ago. Oh gosh, it's heart wrenching. It's about like when Nazi Germany, like when World War II was happening, and there was this father who, this family they were taken into a camp, and he and his son were together, and the father just kept making everything be a game for him and his son, and even when the father was like being marched off, to the gas chambers, like he was still like, hey, this is great. Like he just assumed that like even in the midst of this horrible thing happening, there was beauty in the world. And
Okay, I probably know the story. I just don't know the name of the movie because that sounds familiar.
yeah, but here, like when you have that assumption, right, then you receive that. And a lot of
Yes.
times people, because they say assumption, like, well, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. It's like, well, it depends on what you're assuming,
It
right?
does. Yes. And I will say this, I think sometimes to simplify it so much does maybe, I don't like the word trigger, but it might set people off because why would anybody assume they're not worthy? Why would anybody assume that they don't deserve to have money or to have the things that they want? It's
Mhm.
not necessarily that you consciously assume that. Some of it comes from your programming, from your experiences in this world. And like the concept of, have you ever heard of the ladder of inference or what's the term I'm looking for? Uh, Confirmation bias, right?
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
it's the idea that what you expect to see, you will continue to see. What you focus on, you get more of,
Right.
right? So when you are in a state of lack, we'll use money because that's a pretty common example, and everybody, well, most people can relate to this, right? Like when you're looking at your bank account and you're like, holy shit, I have to pay my rent this month and there's only going to be $50 left over after that, and you're like already spiraling into lack, chances are you're going to continue to create that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even if you come into money, if you operate predominantly from a lack consciousness, maybe you get a couple $1,000s in your tax return. Oh, all of a sudden it's gone and you're right back to barely making it work. So, but the good news is you can shift that, right? So we'll offer some tools and some ways that we could help, or that we have noticed shifts for ourselves. And I'll say for me, work in progress for sure. But we were just talking before we got on about, 3-4 years ago now, however long it was when we first connected. We've mentioned it several times in this podcast, but I was in a pretty low spot. And then I can look at my life now and be like, holy moly, has it improved? and specifically because my self-worth has changed significantly.
Yes.
So, and that plays into your self-concept.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And then this is where you can get really deep in the weeds, right? Because I was listening to a podcast this morning and it was said your self-worth is a reflection about how you were treated in the past. And I was like, I think that needs a little tweaking, right?
Yes.
And that your self-worth is a reflection of your beliefs about how you were treated in the past, right? Because like for me, I can look at my history with relationships and I was cheated on many, many times, right? And I can be like, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving. Or I can look back and be like, wait a minute, there's another timeline here that I can enter. And it's that like I attracted those people because I didn't believe that I was worthy. Right? I didn't see it. So I kept bringing people into my life to confirm to me, to show me, what's true. Right. Or I could look and be like, oh, I believe that person just wasn't a trustworthy person and it had nothing to do with me and it had everything to do with them. I don't like that one as much because then that just gives away personal responsibility.
Yes, I am such a big fan for, particularly if there's a pattern,
Yes.
you will be best served by owning it.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, I mean, there's no other way to change it. The only thing you can change actually is yourself.
Yes.
It's the only thing you have power over.
Yeah.
So why would you give that away? Why would you?
But I know that when I was in that space of like absolute heartbreak, and it was like, no, like, why would I choose somebody who's lying to me? Why would I choose somebody who's cheating on me?
It's familiar. It was familiar.
Exactly. And that was where like we get in the weeds about this, because then we can talk about energy and quantum physics and frequency and the whole idea that there are so many different realities. It's like, that movie Sliding Doors, you can, and there's a show now called, gosh, what the heck is it? Finding Joe, I think it is. And have I told you about this? I love this show because it shows like the pilot episode is him and he's got this choice at his college graduation. And he's got 3 different choices, like go to the lake with this girl that he'd been dating all through college, or go and ask this girl out that he just met at graduation that he had a connection with, or go to lunch with his family. And the rest of the show is him having made all those choices.
Wow. Cool.
It's fascinating, right? So one, he becomes a nurse, one, he becomes a rock star, and the other one, he becomes a cop. And how it impacts everybody else's life too, right? It's fascinating. Yeah. But the reality is that there are so many different realities that exist, like in this timeline. And this is like the skeptical water, like this stuff is so like really, it's ridiculous. Right? Yes. But you literally are able to, you can be walking down this one timeline and make it jump into, wait a minute, I am, like if I say me with the past relationship stuff, like I am no longer going to choose that story anymore. I am going to assume that all men are fantastic and loyal and loving, and that there is a man out there who wants to adore me and be faithful, right? I'm going to get that. Yes. It might not happen right away. It might not happen 20 years because I may need to grow and evolve to match,
and continue to find proof of this belief, right? Like you have to seek it out. It's interesting that you bring that up because I actually, side project that I haven't kicked off quite yet, but it's very close. Where I want to specifically work on focusing on the good men, because I'm single. We've talked about it on this show many times before. I have plenty of single friends, and I often find myself in these conversations where we're talking about how crappy our choices are. Oh, there's all the good men are taking a lot. And I don't want to have that conversation anymore, because I don't want to believe that truth. I
Right.
no longer want to accept that. I'm going to rewrite a new truth. So the reality is, it's malleable. It sounds bizarre,
Yeah.
but it really is. Like,
Yeah.
you can shift it. And
Yeah.
I know people, well, probably the people that are tuning into us don't necessarily think we're crackpots, because they've already been hearing us talk. But, if you go to the outside world, that's one of the rules that we'll talk about, I guess, is when you read Neville Goddard's work, he's kind of one of the founding fathers of this belief system. One of his things he often says is, tell no one of your desires. Just keep it to yourself. I don't know if I necessarily believe that, because I find personally that I have like a few trusted people I can share these things with, and it helps me build my belief to talk about it. And someone that gives me the space and loves me enough to let me talk about it in the present tense,
Yeah.
that helps add more power to me. So you can pick and choose. I'm the kind of person that picks and chooses the rules I want to follow. But bottom line is, what you speak about, what you think about, what you confirm to be true in your everyday life will eventually actually be revealed to you
Yeah.
as true.
And you mentioned Neville Goddard, but like, I grew up, going to church and reading the Bible, memorizing the Bible, and even the Bible talks about like, seek and ye shall find.
He
Knock.
references the Bible a ton. Have you
Oh yes,
dived?
I listened to some of his podcasts or YouTubes, and I was like, this guy a preacher? Like,
Yeah,
but
no, it's so weird, because he has such a different spin on the Bible that at first I was a little taken aback, because I'm like, oh, I mean, I've just been recently diving deep into some of his older stuff, and I'm like, oh, I totally didn't like hear it in this way before, or maybe even in the past. Perhaps I dismissed it because I was like, I don't want to. I was resistant to this preachy Bible-y stuff, but he
right.
has a completely different perspective on it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the Bible does talk about like, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open to you. And here's the thing.
Yes.
I love this law, and I guess this is kind of a law too, but like, the universe always says yes.
Right.
Always. And
Yes.
the universe is completely neutral about
Right.
what you ask for, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
if you're like, all men are bad, it's like,
Oh,
okay, I'll
that's
give
what you
you,
want.
right?
Yes.
But it's neutral about it. It's like, it has no like, oh, this is good, this is bad. It's just part of your journey and your experience.
Yes.
And all the
Yes.
agents, like, I did a sweat lodge this weekend, which I didn't really tell you about, but have you ever, no, you haven't done a sweat lodge, have you?
I mean, I've gone to some hot yoga.
Right. Very different.
I've not done a sweat
Very
lodge.
different. And so it's led by a shaman. And when I say I did, it was kind of because I only made it through one round of the sweat lodge, which I've told you, I've talked here before about my experiences with plant medicine, that I have a very visceral body experience, and
Yeah.
that I end up shaking, and like, it's like I have to birth an alien out of me. Like, it
Yeah.
just, I'm like, "Ah," it's just not a pretty experience. And I couldn't stay in the tent because I needed space to move and get it out of me. And I know, like, I asked my friend later, I was like, was there anybody in there like making noise or like doing it? She's like, no, everybody's pretty still. And I was like wailing, crying, like, blah,
I tried to do a cold plunge the weekend before last, and I couldn't stay in that. So quite the opposite, but I had a similar experience.
Yeah. But within this experience, like, there's a shaman leading it. And I love hearing the wisdom of these ancients, because it all comes down to the same thing we've talked about. Everybody's saying the same thing. Like, different teachers are teaching in their own way, but the shamans are like, everything, the earth, she just keeps replenishing and keeps giving back. And like, it just, okay, here, you want this? Yes. You
Yes.
don't? Yeah, like, we'll just keep giving you what you ask for. And so the onus is on us for what we ask for.
Yes,
And,
and mindfully noticing. Takes
right.
practice. Takes practice to notice when you're talking about what you don't want, right? Like, or pushing it away. You have to constant, and not in a like spiritual bypassing, like, not trying to freaking gaslight yourself, but noticing and honoring, like, oops. And now
Mhm.
how do we like create a new belief? Like, it isn't going to happen overnight. It's not.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah.
my challenge with this like law of assumption or any of these teachings where people are like, you just gotta visualize it and then it can happen. And I'm like, oh, F you. Because so like I I asked earlier just because I wanted to just like check in with someone. I'm like, is there's a woman who says like, if you see it, wait, what's the terms? It's like if you I gotta find it. If you can see it in detail, it must happen. And I was like, okay, there have been times like growing up, I thought for sure I was going to be married and done having kids by the time I was 30. That has not happened. Like, and it won't happen because I'm way past 30, right? Um, and but there were other times, like, where I did, like, manifest something, right? And it's like I never saw the details. I never like, I just had a knowing. And so my first thing about this is because a lot of times people talk about this stuff and it's like, "Well, you just see it." And I think we have to really be careful when we say that because some people aren't seers. Some people aren't
Yes.
visionaries, right? So when I, like, do visualizations with my clients and talk about, like, whether you're seeing, feeling, hearing, or sensing, right?
Hmm.
Every time I've like really manifested something big, it's like I just knew. I didn't know the details, but I was like, "Oh no, that's going to happen." And then I
Yeah.
just would go and I didn't care, you know?
I think two things about that. Sometimes it's easier because the less resistance you have, the easier these things are to be revealed. But I agree with you in that we don't I would not want to encourage people to only use visualization, number one, because I don't even think that's enough. Simply visualizing, I think there's more to it. I think you need to use as many of your senses as make sense for you. And like you said, some people might hear it. You might hear it as voices, for lack of a better word. I know people think, oh my God, hearing voices. Like, no, if you think there's things talking to you, those are your guides, or the other parts of you that do know how that thing is going to feel. And I mean, that's the other thing, is the feeling of it. Like, that's part of the living in the end. Like, how would the person who has this thing feel,
Right.
behave? Like, what would they do? Right? You really, the act as if thing is not like go out and spend a shit ton of money like you have it when you don't. That's not like, that's where I think people also can go a little astray with it, right?
Mhm.
It's a little oversimplified. That's where I like Dr. Joe's work. I feel like he does offer some other ways of kind of getting into that experience, at least when his work far better than I do. But
Yeah. And for
yeah,
anybody who's listening, you're like Dr. Joe, it's Dr. Joe Dispenza,
right.
and he's got one of his books that I recommend the most is I just blanked on the name of it. Crap. Still
I know.
remember.
Wait, I have it too. I mean, the one I really like a lot is Becoming Supernatural, but there's an older one.
Yeah.
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Yes, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is, I mean, I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if I recommended that to you because I recommend that to so many people
Yeah.
when it comes to that. But um yeah, but I want to go back to this thing about the whole like there are times when I'm like, "Oh, I saw it." And I'm like, "I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids," right? And it didn't happen. And then there are other times where things happened and I'm like, "But I didn't really like take time to really like dive into it." And what I was reminded of, like my coach, is that when we have things, like when we're like desiring things from a ego standpoint, and let me say this, like a lot of times people think the ego is bad, the ego is wrong. No, like this is a part of who we are living here on earth. The ego is our friend, right? But when we do it from a place of, oh, when I get this thing, then I will be complete,
Mhm.
right? That is not the place to come from manifesting, right?
That's lack consciousness, really.
Right, right. So I look at all those things and I was like, oh, well, like I was following this programming of like, grew up, went to college, sort of for 2 years anyway. I mean, I did graduate and get a master's eventually, but like, thought I'm supposed to do this, go to college, get married, have kids, instead of like really following my soul's path and what's for the greater good. And when I can look back now and see, oh my gosh, I don't know, but, like, it seems like I would not have been able to help as many people as I've helped had I done that,
Right.
right? And so
Well, I find it just a little bit more peaceful in my soul to accept some of those things and been like, well, that must not have been the highest path for me,
for my
right?
good
There
and
is
the
some
greater
amount of letting go, right?
yeah,
Where if you don't see a specific desire um,
fulfilled.
manifested, I don't like that word, revealed, however you want to say it. But if you don't see it come to fruition and you're given timeline, doesn't mean you failed. It does not mean like, oh, you aren't good at this thing called manifestation, because by the way, you're still doing it all the time. It's
Mhm.
just an opportunity to look at, like you said, where was that desire coming from? And then perhaps there's something better on the horizon. I don't know, that's maybe Pollyanna, whatever, however people want to call it. I find it a more peaceful way to live is to trust that sometimes it doesn't work out the way you were thinking, but maybe
Right.
you revise that and maybe there is something even better coming.
Yeah. And it's hard when you're in it, for sure.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I remember and I've talked about this on here, like when I lost my baby, I had at this point, the only thing I had up to this point was like as far as any kind of personal development was my knowledge of the Bible. And there was a story in Genesis that where there's this guy Joseph, and he had who's basically his brothers just treated him like crap. They sold him into slavery, blah blah blah. Well, all this stuff happens. He becomes king. Years later, there's this famine, and his brothers come like groveling at his feet, and they're like, "We'll even know that it's us." Blah, blah, blah. And he does, and he's like, like what happened, like he's like, Satan meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, for the greater good of all. It was like he needed to be sold, for all of these things to happen, for his character to develop, to then be the king, to be able to lead the nation. And I look
Mhm.
at that like, yeah, like God, the universe, whatever, had me experience, losing my baby so that I can learn so many things, in the way that I help people now that I, wouldn't have gotten. And so,
Mhm.
but all of that is like, in many ways I did manifest that because there was always a knowing in me as a kid that I was going to be helping people. You know?
Mhm.
And so, it always works out for the greater good. And so
Right.
whenever things don't happen, like Deb said, when you can look at it and be like when we put our desires or manifestations, it's like, oh, like I would like to experience this or something greater
Right.
is a really great way to, because if you're like, it's got to be this, then you're attached to the ego.
Oftentimes. Yeah, and
Mhm.
you're limiting yourself too. Because I think that's one which, by the way, I have no authority to really speak about this at this point. But in manifesting relationships, I think that I guess the only reason I say I have no authority is because I'm not currently in a beautiful relationship. Um, but
Yeah, with yourself and
well,
that.
I am, yes. I know, but I do okay, I will speak to that because I do think that there was a significant amount of growth that I had to go through and perhaps some painful experiences to get to the point of loving myself enough. And not that I think just because there's not a man sitting right here, I don't love myself enough yet. I do. That's part of why there isn't one because I won't settle. Right.
Right.
But it's very easy to get attached to the idea of a particular person, right? Like you meet someone and they check a lot of the boxes and you think, I want this person. And when that isn't working out, it's discouraging at times, but you have to remind yourself or something better, right? Like
Yes.
all the boxes this person is checking, and I don't know, maybe some I don't know, or
Yeah.
maybe, you know, so that's, the and something better piece. I think I remember when we were working together, remember I wanted a couch or something. There was a
Oh my
funny
god.
story because
No,
I
it was a
needed a
cow.
certain amount of money. Yes, I needed a certain amount of money to get something.
Yeah.
No, there wasn't because I got in a
It
car
was
accident. But there was
it
something
was
that
there
happened
was a couch and the car. But the
It was the
couch, I
couch
think.
and the couch. Okay. It's because I needed a certain amount of money for the couch or whatever. I know I had the taxes, and then there was another time where I wanted a certain amount of money for whatever. I got a bonus from work that was more than I was anticipating that it was going to be. And like a week later, got in a freaking car accident where I was hit by an uninsured driver and had to pay my $1,000 deductible, which brought that extra amount of money down to the original request. And I was like, and you said to me, well, did you ask for that amount or something more or more? And I was like, no. So it's almost like well, you said you only wanted a couple thousand, so we'll take a little bit back.
Right.
Which is comical now. Like I was kind of like, why did that happen? But I will say my perspective at the time was, well, at least I have the money to cover that, right? So that was nice. It wasn't like a holy cow, because I think a me of the past, if that had happened, would have gone into a tailspin of like, how the hell am I going to figure this out?
Yeah.
So there's also I think the perspective of taking those wins and noticing, right? Noticing when you have had success, because the ones that come easily, we tend to think are luck, or we don't even realize that that is a manifestation, that is a result of the belief in ourselves or belief in our ability to create that, right?
Yeah. And nor do
So
we celebrate that. And that's something, I mean, one of the first questions I ask on every call with a client is, what are we celebrating today? And how many people get on the phone and they're like, oh, crap, I knew you were going to ask that, but I don't know. And I was like, how about you got up this morning? Like, how about you took a poop? Like, I mean,
right.
as silly as it sounds, and we are so reluctant to celebrate these little things. But I'm like, if we go out throughout the day celebrating, like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, you just continue to experience more and more.
Yeah.
And we're so like, but so that segues into the whole idea of like, with this law of assumption is like the feeling, like when we are when we can think about, okay, I would like to manifest X, Y, and Z. The first thing, and I always ask this, is never like, most traditional coaching, they're like, okay, you want this. And they don't explore anymore. Right. And they're just like, okay, you want this thing. And I always use the example of an Olympian. Somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, I want to win the golden track in the Olympics. I'm like, okay. A traditional coach is like, okay, what do we need to do? Step, here we go. Right. Where then I ask, okay, you want to win the golden track in the Olympics, so that what? And they're
Yeah.
like, so that da da da. And then it always gets down to like, so that I can feel, and maybe I feel significant and proud and accomplished. I'm like, that's what you are desiring, right?
That's the actual manifestation. Yes.
Right. Right. And so then if each day you go through looking for ways to feel significant, proud, and accomplished, or whatever your feelings are that you want to experience, you're going to find that. And then that doesn't mean that then you don't work towards winning the golden track. It just means that you're feeling the feelings that you want to feel every day, so that when you get to the Olympics, whether you win or not, you've won. Right?
There's so much in that I completely, yes, I want to like second, because also if you put your self-concept too heavily on being a winning Olympic athlete, that you achieve that, and then what? Then
Right.
what are you? Right? And also really honoring that the feeling is a manifestation, right? In
Yes.
every case, the reason you want whatever you want is because you think you will feel better by having it.
Yes. Yeah. And so, yeah. And so when we can create and like generate and create the feeling like before, then, hey, then the thing comes sooner, right? Because the feeling is a frequency. Like, we're getting back to the quantum again, but emotions are energy in motion. And if I'm putting out an energy of despair, of anger and frustration, I'm going to keep attracting that energy back to me. Right. But if I put out the energy of hope, excitement, right, joy, I'm going to get more of that in my world, no matter what's going on in the outside world. And there's a shit ton going on in the outside world right now. And I know some
Yes.
people listen to this and be like, yeah, but you don't understand. I have family over in Ukraine, and that, you're telling me that they're creating this. And I'm like,
Okay.
right. Like,
100%. Like I don't necessarily believe that, but I also think what, like, the best thing you can do for them, for whether you know people like in the middle of this situation or you don't, the best thing that we can all do is cultivate our own inner peace, because then we can hold space for those people. We have to, along the lines of all of this, if we all go down the fear road and despair and we all follow that path, then the whole world is going down. Like, some of us need to stay up here so that we can help elevate it and be there for the people that need a container, that need to hold space. And I've struggled with that, because sometimes I'm like, I feel bad, like I'm not acknowledging that, and I'm just over here working on my Zen. But no, that's kind of a duty.
Well,
It
and that
is.
goes back to, because we have there's the individual frequency and then the collective frequency. And so
Mhm.
right now, I love this. Another thing Shaman talked about this weekend was how, like, we always, the ego looks at, like, I'm a light being and I just want to be in the light, right? But darkness is where the light begin. Like you have to have darkness in
We
order for
need
that.
all the parts. We need
Right.
all the
Right.
parts. Yeah.
Right. And the seed starts to grow in the darkness. Right. And I don't know why, for some reason, I'm just always like, oh my gosh, yes. Because we just think, like, there's something. And so when we look at what's going on collectively, it's like there's a light being shown on all the darkness. I mean, things are just coming to light day after day after day of all the corruption, all the evil. And it, like, people, not everybody yet, but people are starting to see it,
Yeah.
and seeing these things. And so we have to look at it from the individual perspective and also the collective perspective. And the more, like you said, the more that we are responsible for our own personal energy, right? And not being Pollyanna, but like, I'm going to keep myself at a high level, like that will impact, the greater. And it,
At the very least, the small circle of people that you interact with, right? So,
right.
even a minimal impact is still a positive impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like kind of all over the place with this, but I think this is all part of it, right? Like, it
Yeah.
really is like the whole picture. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of questions, because it's like, it's like, oh, it's not that easy. And it is, and it's not. It's both
Right.
and, right? And
Yes.
so
Like
let's,
most things.
yeah, exactly. So, okay, a couple of tools to be able to help you to exercise this, law of assumption, and, acting as if. So it's like, say that you are, we'll just stick with the theme of relationships, right? Say that you desire to be in a relationship with, a certain type of person, right? So then one of the things that you can do is a tool that I like to call, I think Dr. Joe talks about this, Kyle Cease has talked about this, is remembering your future, and or thinking from the end. It's
Mhm.
thinking about when I'm this, right? And then talking as if it's already happened. So it could be like, you and I getting on the phone and being like, oh my gosh, Deb, like, I went out the other night and I met this amazing guy, and we just had this, like, such a strong connection, and he was emotionally intelligent and emotionally available, and he was like, he cared about our freedoms, and he ate well and took care of himself, and he didn't have any addictions. And oh my gosh, like, it was so magical when we met. Right. And then Deb could, say back to me, like, oh my gosh, I remember when we were on the phone and you were telling me that about the night that you guys met, and da, da, da.
Yeah.
Like, that is so much fun. And you feel the energy lift up, and it's like, oh yeah, wait a minute. I can go find this person. Right.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. I like another little trick. I'm going to piggyback on that one. Would be to tell that in the story of I mean, basically you just said it, but last week, right? Last week I met this guy. Um, and then think about find the little pieces of you that go, oh my gosh, you're not ready for that. Or, and the acting as if part, it's like, okay, I mean, did you make, like, if you wanted to bring him home to your place, and would you be embarrassed if your bed wasn't made? Would you be embarrassed if you were wearing ugly underwear, or like whatever? Not to say you're going to sleep with the guy right away, but anyway, like, think about those pieces of it, because like, it's even those things, like, behave in the way that you would if that person were around, because then you're inviting that person to be around. I just noticed, for me, sometimes one of the things I've been trying to do is, when I know I'm definitely alone, I might wear like a super ugly t-shirt to bed and like old ugly granny panties. Like, stop doing that. Like, wear the cute PJs for yourself, but you know what I'm saying? Like, wear
Yeah.
them because you're putting yourself as if it's happening.
Yeah.
So it's a silly strategy, but talking about it from it happened last week and then looking at like, oh, what stirred up? Like now you know there's something you need to clear or work on to make space for that to come true.
Yeah. And I love that you said that because I remember the first time I encountered this exercise and I, was super resistant. And I'm like, it hasn't happened because I'm so logical. And I'm like, but it hasn't happened. So how the hell am I supposed to talk about this? And I could feel block after block after block. And it was like, no, I can't find that guy. No, I can't have that success. No, no, no. And it was an invitation to just write those down and be like, I don't believe that I'm worthy of finding this person. I don't believe that I'm worthy of success. I don't believe I can be successful. Well, those are all things that are blocks and distortions and like what my coach calls slave codes, right? That are preventing you from believing the assumption. And that's the crap that we got to get cleared out.
Yes.
Right? We have to be able to acknowledge it and literally rewire your coding. Because just like a computer, like you put a code in the computer and then the computer puts back what you are, like we put into our minds a certain code, right? And then as we mentioned, we're going to go like, putting it out and keep finding it. So we have to acknowledge those codes and be like, okay, this code is not serving me. Like I want to be able to say like, oh my gosh, I met this great guy, and feel that freely, but I don't. And so that means that there's distortions like and blocks that need to be liberated from your body. That's
Right.
Deb and I can help you with that. And there's so many modalities that can help you with that. But I love, like, I got to read this to you because I got this text this morning from a client and we've been working together off and on. Like we've just like, we coached for a long time and now we just do energy work here and there. And I have so many texts. It's crazy. But she's like, I have to, she's like, I look back at some statements in 2019 we worked on and wanted to share that all of these are so true now. And I'm forever thankful. I believe I deserve a life that feels awesome on every level. I believe I have the power to make the changes I desire. I believe I will have true passionate love. I believe my worth is not dependent on anything outside of myself. I believe I'm an energetically attractive person. Like, we went through and cleared out all the distortions of that. And she's like, these are so true now. And I'm like, God, I love what I get to do. Like,
I love that. I want to touch on one little thing is I have two thoughts on this because I know you're going to kind of negate it, but I like it. Like I will have the loving relationship. So practice saying I have that. I am that versus the I will. And I know that the I will and becoming, and that is a strategy to use when you feel blocked.
Yeah.
But practice feeling the I am piece, and then you can identify where's the but am I? Where are the questions coming up?
Well, and these are statements that she had in 2019, right? She's been in a relationship for a couple of years now. Like,
nice.
So now it's like, and she had said, like, when I, like she messaged me this morning because we're going to do some more work. And I was like, fill me in, like, what's going on? And I'm like, how's your life? And she's like, it's amazing. My world is lovely, like, and she's like going on telling me like what's going on. And I'm like, I love this. Like,
that is amazing. That is amazing. I
Because
should go look at what my relationships were back, the ones in 2018, 2019. I probably still have some. I know I still have some of this like belief that the kind of guy I want is like some like magical unicorn that doesn't exist, and that's not serving me very well.
It's not. And I'm with you because I've caught myself a couple of times saying the same thing. And I'm like, I'm looking for a unicorn. I'm looking for a guy who's this and this and this and this. And then I was like, wait a minute. No, they do exist. Like
they do. Of course they do. This is why I'm going to start. I literally have bought a URL. I will announce this by the next time we get on, I'm going to have this thing, but I am going to start celebrating the healthy masculine men. And I don't care if they're married, like whatever. I'm just going to like have my friends and people I know like submit this because I really want to prove to all the women of the world that there are a gazillion beautiful men out there. They are not all crap.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, okay. So just remembering your future or like, acting as if, speaking as if it happened, the week before. And if you find a ton of resistance, like I always did, write those down. That's stuff that we can clear from your body don't keep swirling in it, because here's the thing is that your body keeps this energetic charge, and sometimes it's not as always easy as like, okay, I'm just going to say things differently, because if you
Yeah.
have those distortions inside of you, you can't if a computer like hard drive has distortions in it, right? It's got to be wiped clean before you can like rewire it, right?
And if it
um,
were that simple, this wouldn't even be a conversation. It would be common knowledge, you know?
right.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the other thing, and which Deb talked on with about what I call conscious blabbing. Right? If you are like want to say like, if you think there's no way I can find that the love of my life, right? Then using words that will help you to believe that, like, I'm beginning, to be open to finding the love of my life, or I'm learning, right, to see that it's possible to find the love of my life. I'm allowing myself to be open to it. And those little baby steps, right, can help to get you along the way, because to go from no, I don't believe it, to I totally believe it is like, it's
Your
like,
brain will call bullshit. Yeah.
right. And anytime you're in fighting energy internally, you're not going to get there. So you want to have like, increments. And like when we have massive changes, they tend to not last because it's so overwhelming for the system. And so doing like little steps is way easier. It's just like you can't go to the gym, having never been to the gym, and go in and like lift 400 pounds. Like you have to start with a 1 pound weight, and then 3 pound, and then a 5 pound
Yeah.
weight, right? And so it's the same thing mentally. And for anybody that tells you like, no, you just have to like believe it, tell them to F off. Like you have to like, you literally like, it's a muscle that you're building, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it drives me nuts when people are like, "No, you have to." I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, be cautious of things that sound overly simple, but and I would say also try starting with small things, because it gives you the ability to believe that, okay, I can create the things that I want, right? You don't have to go straight for I mean, it's probably going to be very difficult if you've struggled with money your whole life to say all of a sudden, like, I want $1 million to fall in my lap,
Yeah.
you know?
Or I'm
Maybe
wealthy.
just for $100, maybe just 100.
And it's funny you said that, because I had a client, we were working on money stuff, and she was like, she wanted me to work on her, like energetically clearing what was stopping her from making $1 million in a year. And the business that she had was not making that at that point. And I was like, okay, so are you willing to do the things that need to happen in your business to create that? And she was like, no. And I'm like, then I'm not working on it. I'm not wasting my time to do energy work on this, right?
Right.
Until like you're willing, because there is that part where like you have to be willing to like put in the work.
The
Right?
bottom line is, back to personal responsibility. There's no magic pill for anything. There's not an actual pill. There's not a human being that's magically going to like fairy godmother your life. Like, it's you.
Right. And it really does like happen in incremental shifts and changes.
Yes.
I heard this story. I might botch it a little bit, but there's this guy who was. I'm not even going to go. I don't want to botch it, but anyway, when like when if you Deb, like from when we first met and started working together, in 2018, like if I was like, oh yeah, I can totally wave a magic wand and like make you like where you are today, of like your level of belief and self-love and all that kind of stuff, like it would be way too much,
It
for
probably
your
would have crashed and burned.
yeah.
It's kind of like, you have to, the same analogy, you have to grow incrementally if you want it to be sustainable.
Yeah, and you have to integrate. And it's why people are like, I'm going to do a deep dive immersion. And it's like, yeah, immersions can be good, but like a boot camp is not going to keep you in shape for the rest of your life. You know what's going to keep you in shape for the rest of your life? You going and working out and doing some kind of more movement every day of your life.
Right.
Like a boot camp can be a jump start, but you have to just do it incrementally. And it's the same thing with this stuff. It's like, if you're like, I've never manifested anything. Bullshit. You've manifested a shitty life because you just
it's right. I mean, whatever you have, yes, you have. I mean, I think we talked about that when we've talked about shadow work before, but whatever you have in your life, there's evidence that you wanted it because you have it.
Because you have it.
And that sucks to hear when you have a bunch of shit you think you don't want. But you really have to dig deep and explore. Again, shadow work is a whole nother piece. We have an episode somewhere about it, and I'm happy to like do another one on it. But you have to be willing to face the parts of yourself that need to shift to create the outcomes you want. Because if you're not living the life you want, something has to shift, and that something is you. There's no way around it.
You were having a hard time, like even believing that you can have the life that you want, that right there is letting you know that there are blocks and distortions and these slave codes in you that are stuck inside of your body that need to be shifted out. And we love helping you with that. Like, let us help you with that. And we're not saying we're perfect. Like, doing energy.
I don't have everything I want in my life yet. It's coming, but I don't have it yet.
Yeah. But like, there's something about having somebody come alongside of you, because we can see, like, one of my clients sent me a voice memo and she's like, I just need to share this, but she's like, you're not me, so you can see things that I can't see. So I'm just curious about your input. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I could totally do that. And there are some things that I need to message back and be like, yeah, because you keep looking for it. That's why you keep getting it. That,
right? And there is some benefit to having somebody in that actual coach aspect, because you can talk to your friends all you want, but like, for the most part, your friends are probably going to tell you a little bit of what you want to hear. And sometimes you need to hear the things you didn't really want to hear. Yeah. Unfortunately, Yeah.
So, okay. So just to like wrap this up, right? The law of assumption, right, is acting as if, assuming as if that thing is happening, right? And then to practice and build that muscle, remember your future, like talk as if it's already happened. Whether it's journaling, I hate journaling. According to my human design, even, it's like, no, journaling is not for you. So when people are like, oh, you got to journal, like, no, you don't have to. Like, I'm an auditory processor, so talk it out, right? Like, literally get your phone, put on voice memo, talk it out. Whatever way works for you. There's no one right way, for any of this.
I like journaling, and I will say sometimes, like, it doesn't even have to be legible journaling either. Like, you don't have to write a storybook. Like, I literally at night, I do this. Yeah, I do this at night, and I can't even read what I wrote in the morning. Like, I do it in the morning. I do it at night, and sometimes I also do it in the morning. And then when I go back and look, I'm like, but it's just the act of dumping that thought. It's just so scribbly, and it doesn't matter.
Right. Right. Yeah. You're not writing a novel. It's not going to be published. Right. But just getting out, up here, into there, or calling up a friend and seeing, like, share this with them and then say, hey, you want to do this little remembering your future? I had a friend that for a while we were every day, we'd send each other a message, like at the beginning of the day, as if it was the end of the day. And I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm like, my day was so amazing. Like, I had the most amazing calls with my clients. Like, I felt so great in my body, and this happened, and this happened, this happened. My day was set up so great then. It was so much fun, right? Because I was creating my day. I was acting as if it already happened. So that's a really fun thing to do. Yeah. And then another, I can't remember if we even talked about this, but when you're finding yourself spiraling, a very simple thing is just to literally notice your breath, focus your breath, and just say this, like, I'm calling back my energy from the past and from the future, and I'm bringing it right now into the present moment, just to get yourself grounded so you're not spiraling. And then from that place, right, you can then work to create what it is that you desire to create. And then conscious blabbing, using transition words. If you feel like I can't say this thing right now, what's a word that would like help you feel like you're one step closer to it? You don't have to go to A to Z, go to B, and then go to C, and then D, E, F. And then, if there's things that come up that are blocks or distortions for you, reach out. Let us help you clear them out. I like, we're really good at it. So it's funny because that I was another client that I used to work with reaching out. I love this stuff. So that's all we got for you.
Yeah, we might have to do a part 2. Apologies, we get so excited. We were definitely all over the place in this one. That's probably more my fault than anything. Heather's always the organized one. I'm like I'm just gonna talk off the top of my head, and I'm gonna go all over off on tangents.
But that's okay because, like it all works beautifully together. And
Yeah.
like none of us are the exact same. If everybody was like me, I think the world would be a little bit better, but it would be boring. It would be boring.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Ding, ding, ding. Okay.
Yeah, you're
Sorry.
blowing up.
I know.
Okay.
Okay. Thank y'all for listening. Let us know what you thought. Let us know if you've ever experienced, this, if you've ever consciously, because you have every single day, right?
Yeah.
But just we'd love to hear your experiences on this. And, if there's any specific things that you want us to share about, let us know. And we will talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.